just been in sales leadership for a while. So let's go ahead and kick off with the purpose, place, and duration of a demo. Today we're talking about the demo, and everyone who's in sales, whether you're selling things door to door or you're selling big box enterprise software to Microsoft, let's say, or IBM, you conduct the right demo, which sometimes is a bit subjective, but we'll talk about best practices here. There's certainly things that that are no-nos, which we'll talk about, but doing the right demo can really win a deal and help drive your deal move forward, right, and give you certainly a better chance of winning if you do it right. And so if you think about the purpose, what is the purpose of a demo? I can tell you that it's not to demo your entire solution, right? So that's one thing when we talk about things not to do, is don't go into a demoing every feature that you offer, because number one, you're going to lose people, right? Number two, there's no way you can do that, right? There's just not, unless you have like one feature and I don't know, right? So either way, I even if you did have one feature, I wouldn't spend the entire call or meeting on one demo. So that's one thing that you definitely don't want to do. What you really want to do with a demo is, and here's the other thing to keep in mind, is that there's not just like one type of demo. There are multiple demos in a sales motion or sales, I would say like sales cycle. Different people call these strategies different things. These days we use the word motion to describe it. So just keep that in mind, that there are different types of demos that you do at different stages of a sales motion. And you can think of a sales motion as a process that you're following, where you start at like step one, and I'm just making this up here, but the end of that sales motion or cycle or process would be step 10, let's just say. And step one might be picking up the phone and calling a prospect to find out if they would even engage with you. And then step 10 is essentially, did they buy? Yes. Did they buy now? Do they want to buy later, or do they not want to buy, right? So you want to get to a decision. So there's a specific demo that you'll use for various steps in that motion. And so one demo that you might do is some people are calling it a harbor tour, but it's really like a short demo, right? Where you're just trying to kind of get people excited about what you're doing, give them a glimpse into your product, and then use that to drive to the next step. Let's say that was on the first or second meeting. We'll talk a little bit about sort of the general consensus, whether you want to do demos on first calls or first meetings or not, here in a second. But that's one type of demo. There might be another demo, let's say mid-funnel. Maybe this is like, or midway in that process. And this is, let's say, step 5 or so. And this is a more comprehensive demo, right? You've been engaging with this prospect and the stakeholders that have to be involved in this deal for let's say, a while now. Maybe it's a couple of days, couple of months, couple of weeks, et cetera, depending on your sales cycle. And now you know more about the organization. That's going to be a little more comprehensive. And so that's one. That's another one, rather. And then there could be another one, like a POC, a proof of concept, where they're like, all right, well, can you just like build us essentially like a prototype or a proof of concept of what this would look like for our organization? And now you're starting to bring in more people from your organization into this project now, right? In B2B SaaS, we use sales engineers, which are pre-sales professionals, to help do those or build those proof of concepts, right? And so this is a really nice way, I think, of understanding what that initial demo would look like. And look, obviously I'm oversimplifying it, or hopefully, on on this call, and there's a lot more intricacies here, but I'm kind of just, sort of like giving a higher level overview. When I was a door-to-door salesperson, I'd knock on the door, and this is a very simple sell. $1 million solutions that could take weeks, months, or years to sell. Or there are smaller, lower priced solutions like like this example that I'm going to give you today, which is this door-to-door sale where, just say you're selling a $20 kids book, so when I was a door-to-door salesperson, and by the way, this sale would be, let's say, 20 minutes, right? You're going to knock on their door. You're going to either say yes or no, and then you're out of there. You're never going to go back, right? Because that's just the way it works for that transaction. There's a lot of reasons why, but that's another topic. So I'd knock on the door, try to get in the door. When I got into the door, I'd ask them a couple questions, right? And so what I was selling was educational books. And my questions early on were just really helping me figure out what pages in the book I was going to demo. We call this discovery, right? And so I'd ask, let's say, mom, tell me what your kids are struggling with in school. I know that the math teacher here is not great, or whatever, or the science teacher could get better, etc. Mom will tell me, oh, you know what, my kids are not, need some help with algebra, etc. I said, anything else? Oh, science, they're like bombing chemistry. All right, great. Now I would have a book. I'd have a demo book. And for y'all out there that remember the encyclopedias before the internet exploded, you had these like, massive encyclopedia things that I'd sell. Obviously, I could not carry those around. So I had this demo book. But the book was about this thick and had, I don't know, 400 pages in there. And I could demo a lot of different things. So that's why I did that discovery, those set of questions early on. And so then I'd say, okay, great, Mom. Well, listen, I'm going to go ahead and show you a quick demo of the educational book. I forgot what we called it. And then I'd set her up with some questions like, and if this thing makes sense, are you able to buy today, et cetera, et cetera. So what did I do? Of course, I did not spend, and I had 20 minutes. I was actually always looking at my watch because I knew the law of averages were going to help me sell more, and I had to stay on my process. And so what did I do? I opened the book. I said, Mom, look, here's the algebra section. Great. Does that look like it would be helpful? And I'd look, she'd say yes or no. I'd look at cues, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'd show the science or chemistry. Does that look great? Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. And then I'd close the book. That was it. I'd spend, of those 20 minutes, I'd spend 5 minutes on the actual demo. And then I'd follow up with my process, which was then, getting my order book, et cetera. So the reason why I bring that up is most of us here are going to go in tech. We're not going to sell books door to door, but there are some fundamentals that exist in sales, whether you're irrespective of what you're selling. And so that is an example of what the demo should do, where it should give you a glimpse. It should be relevant to the prospect, give them a glimpse rather into what you're doing. It should communicate, yeah, that's for me and that's solving my problem. Okay. And then you move on. Right. And so for me, I had couple more minutes to then get my order paper and give it to Mom and get her to cut me a check, and hope that Dad was not hiding out in the back with a machete. So one thing I used to do, and this is actually a really interesting point too around presentations and sales, is you always want to ask, hey, if this thing makes sense, is there anyone else you have to pull in to help make a decision today, right? And so we do the same thing in enterprise sales or B2B sales. We say, we're doing it over Zoom these days, right? Are there any other people in the department or in the organization that have to be involved? Right. So that's kind of outside of the demo here for today, but that's another really important thing because you can bring people in. Because what happens, someone in another on your team or another department kills your deal because you didn't check them. The other thing to think about is using that same concept of relevancy, right? Whereby I am only showing Mom in this example the chemistry and math. Yeah, there's probably other stuff a ton of other things I could try to sell her on, but I'm not going to do that. Especially these days, people's attention spans are way small, right? And so you don't want to do that. You don't want to oversell and then you kill it. Because there's a thing called the buying line that I remember my mentor years ago told me. Brian Ross, shout out in Jacksonville, Florida. I think he's retired now. But Brian used to tell me, he'd say, you got to get people over that buying line and then close them at that moment. Because if you continue to ramble on, they're going to start to drop below it. And then you're going to lose your deal. Or they're not going to be excited, or they're going to doubt, etc. So just another thing to keep in mind. So again, I showed the prospect a quick snapshot of the value based on what I know about them. Okay. And then I'm going to move on. Now, how does that relate to us in B2B sales and technology sales, right? SaaS sales. Well, you might early on have to demo someone who's not going to be a decision maker, right? So for example, with Reprise, we might get a marketing coordinator or a product, junior product marketing person or salesperson on the phone, and we'll give them a quick demo of the features that they care about. Again, we're not going to give them show them the whole kitchen sink. We're going to show them, hey, this is how it looks like every day when you're going to use Reprise to prospect or to pitch to your prospect. We coincidentally do demos, right? But so so me as a Reprise salesperson selling to that individual, I'm going to again give them the customized experience around what matters to them. And then I'm going to also think about everyone else that I need to demo or meet within that organization. And then I'm going to create personalized or customized demos for them, right? And so I'm not going to show the manager, okay, the same user experience that I demoed for the end user who's using it day to day. Because what does the manager care about? Well, a variety of things, but they're going to think about, okay, well, the manager's managing, let's say it's a sales team of reps that are potentially going to be using Reprise every day. Well, I'm going to show them the analytics. Here's how you can see how your reps are doing on a consistent basis, right? How they're performing, etc. And I'm not going to give them the kitchen sink. Yeah, I'm going to focus on those things, right? And then, of course, pricing and budget and all sorts of stuff. The executive, maybe there's a CRO that sits on top of those folks, right? And we can, we get lucky, we're able to get them in the room, right? Or in the Zoom. I'm going to make sure that I'm showing something that's relevant to them. And so, if you have these individuals on individual calls, then it's actually a little easier to customize that experience, especially on Zoom when you can't, read the room, right? If you do, and this is really important, and I've heard this from a variety of different people over the last several months, it's like, it's really difficult, right? Because you might have a CRO or executive, C-level executive on a sales call, and then you'll have that kind of like influencer or day-to-day user, and then you have the manager too. Now you have three different personas who care about three different sets of features and topics, but who all have to be involved in the decision-making for this potential deal, who can all kill the deal, right? Because it's not just the managers who could kill the deal, especially these days. It could be the end user goes, oh, you know what, but boss, I'm not going to use that every day. There's another solution that's easier, et cetera, right? So in some ways, it's a lot more complex. So how do you then demo a room or a Zoom and speak to each stakeholder, right? So keep that in mind. Now your demo has to be a little more complex. Now it's not, I'm going to do a 45-minute call and then 40 minutes of demos because I got to speak to everybody in that room. That's not it either, right? It's going to be keeping it, it might be a little longer, but I'm going to have now a more well-balanced approach and making sure that I am calling folks out on the call. Sally Sue, I know you're, run the department. Does this look like it would solve X, Y, Z, et cetera? Jane, I know you're the day-to-day, these features, et cetera. So, most likely if you have a CRO in the room, I would probably, or Zoom, I would probably focus more on that. Have had a separate meeting. It probably means also that you had a separate meeting beforehand where you demoed the end user day-to-day stuff or feature sets. Again, there could be a lot of different ways to sort of that this shakes out, but keep that in mind, right? So I might over-index on the executive who's in the room or Zoom, and then say, Sally and Bill, let's maybe we can follow up and I can show you the day-to-day stuff, right? Because obviously if the CRO's convinced and it's going to help them report better to the board, etc., then of course you're going to have a better chance of getting the deal across the table. So let's summarize a little bit here. So number one, there are different demos you can do that map or align with different stages or steps in your sales motion or process. Number two, do not demo everything, right? Think about what makes sense. I got a couple seconds of attention from this individual, even if they're on a 40-minute call, etc. You're not going to have their attention that whole time, right? They're going to be goofing off on Facebook or whatever, or on Slack working on something else, right? So keep it in mind, right? How do I focus on those, couple points, 2 or 3 points that are going to really resonate and be super personalized to that audience member? Think of it as you're presenting, you're an audience, to an audience on TV, right? Like it's got to be relevant or they're going to change the channel. Number two, or I should say number three, keep in mind if you're doing a demo for multiple stakeholders in a room, how do you speak to each individual? And if you have senior people in that Zoom meeting, then maybe over-index on that. Point number four, if you have a 30-minute call, let's just say that, you are not spending 27 minutes on the product, right? You're gonna on a 30-minute call, I would say about 7 to 10 minutes, and then you're spending 20 minutes on other pieces, really listening to them. Discovery, we talked about discovery again, being asking those questions to be able to discover more about what is relevant to them. Okay. One other piece that I wanted to add to this equation is that what I did in the door-to-door sales use case was unique to that type of product. Obviously, the philosophy, the tactic it can be fundamentally used across anything you sell. But what I did specifically there was really relevant to them. There is a thing that this is a personal framework that I use which I call pre-approach. Approach, and then in contact. Let me talk about that here for a second. So these are steps in that motion. So that step one for me is pre-approach. Now in the door-to-door sales world, pre-approach is collecting all the information that I need to know to be able to knock on that door and get them to let me in their door without calling the police or shooting me, right? And by the way, I've had guns pulled out on me when I was doing that. For obvious reasons. I was like in the country in Kentucky and a Miami boy there, right? They were like, what is this guy? Anyways, and so pre-approach was me finding out about the school district. Remember, I sold educational books, right? And I would ask kids in the neighborhood, oh, who are your favorite teachers? Every time I'd knock on the door, and even if they didn't buy, I would still learn a little more about the school district. I'd hit up a community and learn who lived where, etc. Right? So I'd ask questions, and then I would kind of go in with already understanding. All right, well, I know math and science sucks in this. The teachers are not great. The kids are struggling, etc. in this community. So this was my pre-approach, and I would verify it by asking, but I kind of already knew going in. In our world, in B2B sales, right, SaaS sales, well, what does that actually look like for us? Well, we have a variety of different tools these days that we can use. So number one, we have tools like Zoom Info, Seamless.ai. They give us all this sales intelligence about the companies that we're prospecting against. They give us the contact information, those sort of things. You want to read press releases, S1s, public document, all these things. You want to go in with as much information as possible about your prospect that then you're going to use to set up your demo, right? And so I am a fan of doing demos, just kind of a sneak peek, that harbor tour on first demo or first call rather. But obviously the more you know, the less you have to ask when you're on your call. So the less discovery you have to do. Now you still do want to like have them verify those things. Like I still asked mom, oh, I know folks in this school district are not doing great in math because the math teacher left or whatever. Is that true? So then I get that the prospect to then verify, look in my face and go, yeah, that's true. So then they're sort of on the hook. In B2B sales, it may be, look, I was talking to your colleague here. Your conversion rates are really low on your website. There's a lot of no shows on your SDR's first calls. And is this true, right? Is this what you're seeing as well? Those sorts of things. Or I know folks in your industry are seeing these types of things. I noticed that you're hiring for these roles, those sort of things. And then you go in and then you're going to use that to craft your quick harbor tour. But again, you don't want to spend it like your entire time focused on, on the demo. Cause again, you're going to lose them. You ever been there where you like walk into a sales room somewhere anywhere, in retail, and they're just trying to sell the heck out of you. And you're like, oh boy, you just turn off, right? Cause you're just, you become defensive. So, we talked a little bit about, sort of the duration, okay, like a less than a third ish around there of the time of your meeting. Of course, this is all subjective, but I'm giving you best practices, the places that these demos come in, depending on a couple of different variables, but using a customized demo experience that maps to where you're at, who you're talking to, your audience, and what you know about the company already. And then also, of course, what you're able to verify directly with them about what that pre-approach stuff. So you can think about it. Before I pick up the phone or do the meeting is in a stage or state called pre-approach. So I'm like, all right, what do I need to know that's going to help me then approach them? And then there's that moment of truth, which is the approach, right? And then you continue to move forward in the sales motion. But that's so important, especially in prospecting or top of the funnel, right? Where, as a salesperson, if you ain't prospecting, boy, and you can't stomach it, you can have a rough experience. But the more that you can prospect early on, the easier that's going to be. If I can call you up on the phone and say, Sally, I was over at your neighbor's house or down the street, or Sally, I work with one of your customers, XYZ, right? And I know that, I've heard that that organizations like yours use this, or have these issues or trying to achieve these things. That's a lot better, right? So again, pre-approach, super, super important, AKA research, pre-call research. There's a lot of different titles for this kind of stuff, right? So, so I did also want to talk about what do bad demos look like. I've sort of integrated that a bit into the conversation. We got about 10 minutes here. So I'm going to run through this really quickly just to remind you, and then touch on what great demos look like, which essentially this has all been about that. And then I'll leave a couple minutes for Q&A. Folks, if you do have any questions, go ahead and click on the Q&A function here at the top. That makes it a lot easier to dive into and remember, and make sure we don't lose any of these questions. But bad demos, I'll run through this quickly. There's some obvious stuff that like showing the wrong features that are irrelevant to them, not having customized experiences, right? So I was helping one of the CEOs of a company that I have an angel investment in. He's more of a technical individual, which is great. Hey, this world would not exist without technical folks. But from a pitch perspective, he like walks into a meeting and then shows his product that had values that of like engineering lingo, right? And he was trying to sell his software to sales and marketing people. So automatically they're looking at that demo, and even if the functionality makes sense, right? They're not connecting. And I remember seeing their faces. They're like, this, is this for me? Right? So make sure that your demo, yeah, exactly. Know your audience, but know your audience, Raul, is so important. And there's so many different variables to it. Because know your audience walking in, right? We talked about pre-approach, but also know your audience from the perspective in the product, in the actual thing that you're demoing. It's like me, like this individual that I was just mentioning, so he's demoing a system, like a CRM system, to these salespeople, but then the values that allowed you to like monitor keywords and stuff like that. The keywords were technical keywords. The audience didn't resonate, right? So they should have had like prospecting, sales, things like that were relevant. So this point is have your actual, whatever it is that you're demoing, be contextually relevant to your prospect. So that's one other one to really super keep in mind. Number two, I talked about it earlier. Do not spend 95% of the time demoing your product. Now, look, I've done this 1,000 times, right? This is a best practice. You get really excited. You're like, oh, let me show them this other thing, or you're vibing. And at a minimum, and by the way, I've over demoed and still closed deals because they liked me and they could tell I was passionate and they wanted to give the benefit of the doubt. But I would walk away from those meetings going, oh my God, I don't know where I'm at. I just don't know, because I didn't focus on listening to them and setting up next steps and all that. Like next thing I know, I look at my clock and I'm like, boy, I got 2 minutes to like set my next steps up, and I'm toast, right? From that perspective. Now some convert, some not, but you also need to know where you're at, right? Obviously, in a sales motion. So that's another reason why you don't spend, most of the call demoing, right? Because you got to do other stuff outside of the discovery questions we talked about. Building rapport, I think, is still important these days. It's not the whole thing. You can't just talk about golf or whatever, what the weather is like for 30 minutes. But you do want to be human, right? And so yeah, again, your time, your duration, making sure you're on point there. And it's fair to say, look, there's a ton of more stuff that I'd love to show you, but I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to be able to figure out next steps or to learn more about your situation, etc. So like if you find yourself speaking most of the time and they're just quiet, again, some people, that's their personality, that's okay, but the majority of the time you're just going to walk away going, I don't know where I'm at, right? And that's really makes for a really rough sales career. And so another one that I hear a lot now is just asking sort of like questions that irritate people. Like, be mindful of your wording. Like, does that make sense? Is a big one that I was taught to ask, but I think, but I know there are different ways to ask that question these days. Some people these days are getting offended, and I've seen that a lot now. Like, don't ask me if that makes sense. Yeah, of course it makes sense. What do you think? I'm stupid, kind of thing, right? And so, so I think a better, first of all, that's not an open-ended, right, question. So you want to set them up to actually communicate deeper, and give you more, right? If you're like Sherlock Holmes, just say, did you do this? Did you not? Right. So you don't want a yes or no answer. You want them to elaborate. So maybe a better way of that is like, if another way of asking that question would be, for example, based on your existing workflow, let's say, how does this integrate in, or how does this potentially solve this problem? Or based on your current goals, how does what I just showed you, XYZ widget, help you reach those goals, right? And so right there, you'll get a lot of information from folks, right? So don't show up late, of course, right? Especially these days where people will log off and, we're back to back. It's not like the 15 minutes you have between meetings, walking and grabbing coffee and stuff like before. And so those are obviously basic stuff. But all right, we have a couple minutes. This topic is really wide. There's some great resources. Check out our resources. Jeffrey, I don't know if Jeffrey's there from our team, but if you have, feel free to follow up with me. I'll put my email in here. So you can email me if you have any resources. I was going to say if Jeffrey was there, if he had access to our YouTube, but we have, of course, a podcast on Spotify and I think all the various platforms out there. That's Demo Diaries. Of course, I just put my email in here. So feel free to reach out to me. I live and breathe these topics, sadly. And so thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. So you can listen to what the audience talks about in Demo Diaries. There's a new movement called product-led growth that we're all about here. Check that out, product-led growth. And you'll see how this actually impacts the demo and when salespeople do demos and what they know when they go into a demo. You can imagine a world where if someone signed up to your free trial or your product before they reached out to you, then they kind of have a little more information about your business. So maybe you're having more of a strategic conversation than showing them, hey, here's what we do, right? All right, so I want to go into some of the questions from the audience. Okay, so this is from an anonymous person. We sort of talked about this earlier. How early in the sales process should you show the demo? So A, depends on how much you know already about them. B, it depends on what you sell, right? So like for and what resources you have, right? So if you do have a solution like Reprise, or maybe you have something else that just makes it really easy, and you have then you can in a sales motion on that first call, in that process, you could say, great, Sally. And this is a nice transition question that my boy Joe Caprio always use, and it was, Sally, thanks for hopping on the phone. Appreciate it. Based on what we know in this industry, or what we've seen with clients that look like you, like XYZ, these are the goals they're trying to reach, or the pain points, or whatever that they're dealing with. Happy to go ahead and show you what it looks like. Do you want me, and this is a question, would you like me to go ahead and show you like a quick demo, a couple minutes, and then we can dive in and learn more? I'd love to learn more about your reason why you reached out to us. So again, it also depends on whether it was inbound, they come into you, or was it outbound. So that'll dictate your talk track. And then leave it on them, right? Give them the opportunity to say yes or no, right? Or yes, I want to see a demo right now. 90% of the time, people are like, yeah, I just want to see it real quick. Again, be strategic. I'm going to show them the points that I know that make sense to them or not. And if it doesn't, then don't show them. And then move on, right? And then get them talking, right? But the demo early on at times will, give them kind of a better idea of like, okay, well, what do you do, right? How does this make sense to me, etc. Okay, so a couple other ones here that came in. How or where do I learn product lingo, definitions, terms, process? All right, so a couple good websites here. Go to, first of all, go to our blog. Definitely go to getreprise.com/blog. There's a lot of stuff. We're going to be organizing the content a lot better moving forward. Shout out to Chris, our new content manager. Go to SaaStr, SAASTR.com, kind of like the Bible of SaaS right now. Go to saleshacker.com. Go on LinkedIn and start to follow, and you don't even have to connect with them. You can just follow sales influencers on LinkedIn. If you just like Google top sales influencers on LinkedIn, you'll find a lot of great stuff. Jay Barrows Consulting. So John Barrows, Morgan, all those folks over there at Jay Barrows out of Boston, they make some fantastic sales content as well. All these things, Aaron Dunlap, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. All these resources are going to be great, and you're just going to continue to pick it up. I have a YouTube that I've been doing for 10 years. If you go to Soto Ventures, media on YouTube, you can take a look at there. I got like content from years ago. There's a lot of resources online right now that you can learn these things. So hopefully that helps, but there's definitely no shortage of resources. Laura asked, what do you do if something goes wrong on a demo? Boy, it depends on really what went wrong, right? So I'd have to understand a little bit more about what was it that went wrong. However, I think it's fair to just like call yourself out, say, you know what, Bob, I dropped the ball on this. This is terrible. Shame on me, and let's start again. Are you okay with that? Right. So I think it's, you got to own up to those things. Like, I think it's about trust and credibility. We're all humans, right? We all make mistakes. Lord knows I make 100 a day, right? So I think that if you own up to it and take responsibility, most times, unless you're dealing with some very angry individual that needs Jesus, right, in their life, or other deities, then you should be okay. Now, if you try to like make excuses or not acknowledge it, then I think that's probably not the right way of handling it. So I know we're like 3 minutes over. I'm not sure. I'm happy to continue to talk about this stuff as long as possible. If there are any other questions, please do put them into the Q&A section. I'll continue until someone takes me off here. But Jeffrey asks about what is the biggest mistake in demo motions that a first-time seller can make. Yeah, I think that the biggest mistakes I referenced earlier, which is you're 99% of the call is demoing random features, and then even worse is you've not left any room to understand whether these this demo has connected with the prospect. So not being relevant, you're just demoing every feature. They say, what is that saying? In the kit, you throwing the kitchen sink at the prospect, and then being dishonest, right? Yeah, of course, like if you show up late, it's gonna suck and things like that. But just outside of the common sense stuff of just being like a respectful, mindful human being, respecting other people's time, etc. Yeah, just like that piece. I'm just thinking back of my own experience as an early seller, and where I'm just talking because I love to talk. Less in my older-ish age, but I've always loved to talk, especially when I was super passionate about what I was talking about. And so I'd say that, Jeffrey, spending way too much time demoing, not doing discovery, not making it relevant to the audience. So any other questions from folks out there? I know we had a couple people. It looks like we still got some people in this session. I'm flattered. That's great. I do love talking about this stuff. I will put my LinkedIn here. Thank you. I love that my colleagues are here for moral support, which is the way we do it here at Reprise. So we are hiring, by the way, folks. I know a lot of this is a career-oriented event here, so do check out our job listings. You don't, by the way, need to have tech experience or even a college degree to compete for a job here at Reprise. We really focus on the human being. So it's really a great place. I was about to launch into why I love Reprise so much, but I'm going to hold back from that. Femi, thank you so much. Adebayo. Bam Adebayo is one of my favorite basketball players right now here in Miami. So if you are related to Bam, I'd love to get some tickets. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the info. I hope it's helpful. Yeah, you do. You have the same name, absolutely. Of course, I'm a big Heat fan here. And then you know what? Relax, breathe. It's gonna be okay. And I remember early on in my career, I was so nervous at times about demonstrations and stuff, and you know, and when I ended up getting into, I don't know, the business world in a more meaningful way, I realized, oh, these are just humans. They're just humans like me, trying to do a good job at their job, not get fired, make good decisions. And so I think, I've not always been, I'm not the most polished, professional. I know most people I know are just, way better communicators, have great resumes, etc. And what I realized at the end of the day is that if I could connect with human beings in a really authentic, honest way, and it happens that my product will align with what they're trying to achieve, I'm going to have a good chance of selling and closing that deal. If not, if you're trying to like be the used car salesperson, I think those days are over, right? Plus, I'll tell you a quick story here. I used, as I mentioned, when I was in graduate school doing those door-to-door sales, and I was a top salesperson, but I wasn't the most efficient. So that 20-minute time parameter or sales process or sales cycles for us, I blew through that all the time because I ended up spending more time with families, and they'd ask me to sit and eat dinner with them and all kinds of stuff, right? Watch TV with their kids. Now I was in these rural areas in America, Kentucky, rural Oklahoma, etc. It's really interesting. Learned so much about different cultures, but I would sell, and but I wasn't so efficient, and what I realized was that after all, when I was looking at my numbers, I realized that I was one of the best in the company. I had the lowest cancellations in the company. And there were others who would just go in there, 15, 20 minutes in and out, and they would sell more, but they'd get more cancellations. And what I realized was that my secret sauce was about connecting with human beings. And I think I only got I'm thinking about my best year. I only got I did it for 3 years. I think 1 or 2 cancellations out of hundreds of orders. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind as you're demoing. Yes, do your best. Yes, follow best practices. But if you don't connect with the person or the prospects, I should say, because we're selling B2B and there's multiple stakeholders that we have to involve in these sales, and your products, they're on the fence about whether your product adds value or not, or whether they want to spend time trying to evaluate if your product can potentially help them, and you don't connect with them, boy, you're done, right? But if they really like you as a human being, you're being honest, they're like, boy, this individual, I know they're a salesperson, but they were just honest with me, and I felt that, and we connected, and etc. All right, I'm not sure, maybe, I'm not sure if this thing's the right fit, but I'm gonna prioritize them on my list because I felt this connection and I felt their honesty. And now, if you do that, and you crushed it. You personalized the presentation, the demo, and you made it relevant, and you connected with all the right stakeholders, and you did all the best practices. That's a recipe right there for success. So, in my opinion, of course. All right. Well, I think we're about 10 minutes over here. I hope that's okay. Thank you so much to the Text Giving Summit of 2021. There was an individual earlier that was speaking. I thought she was fantastic. Who was a Twitter employee, and I used to work at Twitter. So shout out to this individual. I forgot her name, but she was giving such great advice on working with your hiring manager to make them your, I think she said thought partner or something like that. It was really, really insightful, and how to manage up and really knock it out of the park. So definitely look at some of the content here that was pre-recorded, or which I guess was recorded today and will be available in the portal here. And again, shout out to all the individuals that put this event together. It's so exciting to see that technology has transcended and looks more like real society than ever before. When I got into technology 20 years ago, it looked quite different than it does today. And so it's nice to see that there's been a lot of change for the better. So anyways, well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up here today. Thank you so much to the folks who joined us today and wanted to hear my rant on demos. If you do have any questions, I inserted my LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, so you can find me on all the social networks. You just search for Soto Ventures, and you should find me on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, etc. I'm heavy on LinkedIn, of course, because I'm a B2B person. But I also love Twitter a lot. Twitter's been doing great with B2B. On Instagram, but my Instagram is more like my personal life and more like spiritual content, music, art, those sort of things. Facebook is more, I don't know what Facebook is for me. Yeah, I don't know. I'll think about it. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone.